Hey everyone, welcome back to Dalton Reads the Bible. I'm Dalton and we are on day 2 of our Passion Week study. If you have not caught up with day 1 yet, go ahead and click the link in the description below and watch that first, where we talked about the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And today we're going to take a look at what comes next when Jesus enters the Temple Mount Monday morning. While they're walking to the Temple Mount on Monday, Jesus stops along the road next to a fig tree, which I have one here beside me. And it says that he looks at the fig tree and he looks for fruit on it, but doesn't find any because it's not the season for figs. And looking at this tree, it's not blossoming at all. There's no fruit even starting to develop on this tree. It's a much later fruit that comes in the midst of fall. But it says he's hungry, and he curses the fig tree and says, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And the tree withers immediately. Now, this seems like a weird story that Jesus goes to a tree that he knows is not going to have fruit around this time of year. And when he finds that it doesn't have fruit, decides to curse it so that it withers right away. It seems odd that Jesus, who's the Son of God and presumably knows everything, would even think to do something like that. So I think there's a greater message here. You know, when we first see fig leaves in the Bible, it's with Adam and Eve. Right after they have sinned, they realize that they are naked before God. They take fig leaves and make coverings for themselves. Now, looking at this leaf, feeling it feels like sandpaper on my skin. It's rough, it's irritating. I would not want to wear this. But this is what Adam and Eve hide behind. And so maybe Jesus coming up to this fig tree and cursing it is a way of saying that the old things, the things that remind us of our sin, are about to be pushed aside. They're about to go away. The wages of sin are about to be no more. And maybe that is what he was saying by his action of cursing a fig tree less than a week before he changes everything. It could also be that this is happening on his way to the temple, where he's about to do something rather extraordinary. And maybe saying the old way of doing things is about to be pushed away. And when Jesus returns to the Temple Mount on Monday, he comes with a fury. He starts going into the Temple Mount, into the courts of the temple, and it says he starts turning over the tables of the money changers and getting rid of those who sell animals in the temple, saying, "It is written that my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of robbers." And here he comes in and he's upsetting the business of the temple. And we got to ask ourselves, what are money changers and people doing selling animals in the temple? Well, it turns out during this time, you could only use a certain type of money for offerings for the temple. So you would have to go and exchange the money you had with whatever the local currency was. And so people doing that in the temple were making it easier for people. And if you were coming to the temple, you needed to bring a sacrifice, especially for a holiday like Passover. So you had people selling doves and goats to be sacrificed in the temple. And they were doing it in the temple courts. Now, why is Jesus mad at this? Because this is not something that should be happening in the temple. Yes, you're probably going to need to buy an animal, do it outside the temple, and then come into the temple to worship God. And the way the temple was set up is that the outermost court was for the Gentiles, those who wanted to worship and honor God, but weren't Jewish by blood, who couldn't go into the rest of the temple. And it's probably here in the court of the Gentiles that all these animals are being sold and this money is being changed. Now, when you're exchanging money, the people who do that are taking a commission for themselves as well. It's not, and oftentimes it was a pretty significant portion. It was a good way for corruption to seep in. So Jesus comes and he starts turning over their tables and getting rid of all the animals. The book of John even says that he made a whip of many cords to drive the animals and the people out. He is mad. Because this is not how people were supposed to worship God. First off, they're not allowing the Gentiles who are coming to worship God to worship in the only space that is available to them, because it's full of the money changers who are doing corrupt deals, and it's full of the people selling animals, which live animals bring a live mess, and making it hard for that. And in addition, they're doing business in a place that's supposed to be holy and set apart for stuff other than that. And Jesus clears out the temple and drives everyone away, and then probably takes time to clean up a lot of this mess that's there so that people can worship Him, so that people can come and worship God in the temple. And then the book of Matthew notes something interesting. It says, and then, after Jesus had cleared out the temple, it says, and then the blind and the lame came to him in the temple and were healed. Now this is an interesting point that the book of Matthew is making, because it calls back to 1,000 years prior when David first conquered Jerusalem. The people who were in charge of Jerusalem at the time, the Jebusites, this Canaanite group that held control of the city, they mocked him as he was scouting the city, saying, our blind and our lame can keep you out. It is impossible for you to take this city. And so David, in turn, announced to his soldiers, whoever's the first to enter Jerusalem and strike at the blind and the lame, who David's soul hates, will become commander of the army. And eventually they do take control of the city, Joab coming up first, becoming commander of the army of Israel. David taking the city, and then it notes at this point that there is a saying that starts at this moment, that the blind and the lame who David hates are not allowed to enter the house of God. And of course, David sets up the tabernacle here. He brings the tabernacle here. He brings the ark here. He gets everything ready for the temple to be built here. But the blind and the lame were not allowed in the temple. That is, not until Jesus came and healed them. They sat outside the temple gates, begging for money, not allowed to actually enter the area itself. And here we see Jesus bringing them in, healing them so that they can come and worship God really for the first time. With that in mind, maybe it's not a coincidence. The only two miracles that the book of John lists Jesus doing in Jerusalem are the healing of a blind man and the healing of a lame man. Jesus' action on this day, where he comes in and clears out the temple, overthrowing a lot of the business that Caiaphas, the high priest, had previously approved, and then bringing in blind and lame people and healing them in the temple, causes a stir. And from here on out, while Jesus comes to the temple, or around the temple, to preach and teach, he is bombarded with questions by the religious leaders. And we'll get into that more tomorrow. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and to click on the little bell icon if you'd like to receive notifications of when another video goes up. I want to thank you all for joining me, and I will see you later.